Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris. His name is still energetically John Daigle.
Always.
Daisy, how we doing?
Everything's going well. It's the offseason's still rolling along. At this point, I kind of can't believe we went through the drudge of 17 weeks of football. I kind of like this right now.
It feels like 6 months ago, as well as 6 days ago, that the season was in full gear and I was in full tilt. I slept awfully last night, Daigle.
I did too.
I'm in like a rough mood because of it.
Is this how you're going to open the podcast with
Yes,
the sleep schedule?
this is my intro.
I had a good one too. Okay, go ahead.
I had a nightmare.
Oh, really?
Maybe like the worst premise of a nightmare of all time. I was on some reality TV show where the goal was to not sleep for as long as possible.
Okay.
So for that being your dream is just an awful combination of when you fall asleep, your dream is then to not fall asleep. So then you're just constantly waking yourself up in this like whirlwind and whirlpool of sadness and tiredness is really what I woke up in this morning. It was awful.
It was awful. It's literally a nightmare.
Yeah, because and I was some like Japanese game show where I couldn't even understand the language. Yeah, it was just weird. I don't know where my brain thinks of these things.
It's funny you say that because have you heard of the show Documental?
No.
I've been watching it lately. It is a show where they put 10 to 12 comedians in a room, lock them in a room, and the goal is to not laugh.
Oh, I have heard of this.
Okay, so I've been watching the 3 seasons of that. So it's funny you mention just international game shows because that's kind of what I've been going through.
If that is already not a show, is my premise a show already? If not, like that should be something.
Sounds like Fear Factor.
That's
honestly.
I don't know about that. Should we get into football?
Yeah, let's do it.
Was that enough of an intro?
I think that's a good intro.
To dive into what
if it
we're
makes you
doing
feel
today?
better, my sleep schedule was I woke up at midnight and couldn't go back to sleep. So here I am right now. I think I'm on coffee number 5, and I'm just rolling.
I've never understood not being able to go back to sleep.
I don't get it.
I must have life much easier than you, but how do you not fall asleep from midnight
Mama
until
Daigle had it.
8
So
a.m.?
I assume
that it's genetics.
I just wake up. I woke up sometimes as a child. We're getting far too behind the scenes. And she would just be in the living room reading because she reads, Josh. Now you know where that comes from as well. So I guess that's the story of it. I don't know.
I guess that is the story. All right. So today we're going to hit on news, as we normally do. We're in with the trade machine. You know, free agency is coming up. I think we're like exactly a month away from free agency hitting.
Feels like it.
Obviously, a ton of teams change, or players change teams during that time. We're going to throw some player-for-player trades because there aren't enough of those in the NFL nowadays. They're always wonderful when they do happen. So we'll come with some ideas. Maybe some GMs are listening, obviously, to this. And they'll pick up some ideas along the way. Let's start off with some news, though, because there's been plenty since the last time we sat here and recorded it. And the first one happened today. Drew Brees is returning for the 2020 season. Here's what his Instagram post was. My feelings about the 2020 season, which was a picture of Drew on top of a mountain with his arms and hands extended. I look forward to the grind and the journey. For the reward at the end, it will be all worth it. Love you, Who Dat Nation. Let's make another run at it. What do you think of this, John Daigle? Because it's not like Drew Brees is getting any younger. Sometimes his negatives have popped up over the last few years. But this Saints team is built to win right now. They just haven't been able to overcome these wild mistakes over the last couple of years.
Well, as you said, they're built to win right now. And as long as you keep putting yourself in that position, then you just hope it works out. There's no guarantee to win every year. We know this. But the process is all you're concerned about. And the process is still correct. Coming back for his 15th season with the Saints, 20th season in the league now. My mind immediately jetted to what they do with the number 24 overall pick now. And, more to the point, Taysom Hill's contract situation as a restricted free agent.
I think that's very fair. There's been a lot of Taysom Hill talk over the last couple weeks, but Taysom Hill's going to be most likely back on this roster because we need to always keep in mind, it's not like Taysom Hill is this free agent that can go anywhere. He's a restricted free agent. They can place a first-round tender on him, a second-round tender on him, and keep him on the roster. Because
the first round is my guess, too.
That's going to be very telling to me.
It's crazy, but...
This is how I think of it, is because Sean Payton has certainly propped up Taysom Hill. He did it on this very show. But do they actually want other teams to bite? You know, do they want to set the lure out there for another team to be like, a second-round tender, maybe we view Taysom Hill as a difference maker, and we'll give him a contract and pay that second-round price to get him on our team. And if the Saints do that, then I think that they're more than willing to let Taysom Hill walk. But if it's a first-round tender, they certainly know that no one is going to pay that price, and they definitely want him back on the roster next season.
The first-round tender right now is projected to be around $4.6 million.
Which is nothing.
Yeah, which seems more than reasonable given he caught, 7 receiving scores last year? Like an integral part, clearly, of their entire offense. And as Drew Brees said, as you mentioned, not only to PFT, but to Rotoworld, he's more than happy coming off the field more if it means the team winning.
Yeah, we actually have a lost interview with Drew Brees on this podcast. So
yeah. He did say that, though.
I kind of feel like we can basically state whatever he said on that podcast and just make it up, and no one will ever know.
He broke it here first.
Yeah, he broke it here first that he was going to come back for the 2020 season. There's another quarterback in the fold, or was last year for the Saints, and that is Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater, with Drew Brees returning, with Taysom Hill probably returning, is not expected to return. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported that Teddy B is expected to have a, quote, strong market in free agency and could land a multi-year deal, paying him around $30 million per year. That's a very rich sum of money, John
What
Daigle.
were your initial reactions when you saw the reported number?
That I instantly went over the cap, looked at that $30 million mark among other free agents, or among other quarterbacks, I should say. And right now, that's only Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, and Russell Wilson. It was interesting, though, because the $30 million per year figure doesn't make a lot of sense when it was also followed up from a Fowler tweet saying from NFL Live, multiple teams expect Bridgewater to have that strong free agency market, as he mentioned, but as a starting or bridge quarterback for a team in transition. There aren't that many teams across the league that are looking for bridge quarterbacks. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and I know I've seen some speculation that perhaps it makes sense to land with the Bengals on a $25 million deal, and therefore they can go Chase Young over Joe Burrow. But all of these are just so outlandish. It's just so hard to pin them on a spot. And $25 million is the number I'd put the maximum on. But even those odds, I'd say 5%. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, look, I mean, we haven't even heard that many links of where Tom Brady might end up, but that contract figure is reported around $30 million as well. I love Teddy B. I will always love Teddy B.
Yeah.
But we also need to understand who he is as a quarterback right now, and those 5 or 6 games that the team went undefeated with him as a quarterback last year in New Orleans. I wouldn't say that Teddy lost those games, because he certainly didn't, but he wasn't the reason why they won them either. You know, it was awesome defensive play. It was great scheming by Sean Payton, and Teddy was fine. He was solid in those. This is also a player who could have had the Miami Dolphins reportedly starting gig last year and decided just to come back to New Orleans for that, and now he wants a starting job. I would love to see Teddy as a 16-game starter, but they're just where the dominoes are right now, and none of them have fallen. You know, if Tom leaves, then kind of all the dominoes fall in a different direction. You have this whole carousel at the quarterback position. But where everything stands right now with maybe James going back to Tampa and Tom going back to New England and, Cincinnati picking Joe Burrow at number 1, we don't live in this era anymore where a quarterback goes to a team, starts for 16 games, and then a rookie takes over the next year that they drafted in the previous year. That's just not how the position works anymore.
Right. And it comes down to how many teams are truly rebuilding. And right now, as you said, it's one hand, and even then, I struggle to think about who. A team like the Raiders, possibly the Chargers, and then another team we're about to talk about, the Panthers, are the only 3 that come to mind off the top of my head.
And even with those teams now, contending is obviously something coaches always want to do, but this is a difficult discussion and a much larger one, where you wonder if you really want to sign someone like Andy Dalton, or trade for someone like Andy Dalton, or sign someone like Teddy Bridgewater, when you are in that rebuilding phase. Would you rather play maybe a Kyle Allen or a Will Grier if you're the Panthers and win, 2, 3, or 4 games versus pay a Andy Dalton or Teddy Bridgewater to win 6, 7, 8 games and take you out of that top spot? It's not guaranteed you get that number 1 pick, but there's a major difference between being in that top 3 and then that 4 through 8 designation that they might be if they win that many games.
Do you think he's looking for a extension, like a 3 to 4 year deal, or do you think he
Teddy.
is? Yes. Or do you think he would mind a 1-year, $15 million deal?
Kind of prove it?
Yeah, but I don't even know if he needs to prove it. Just a team that needs a 1-year guy.
I mean, the name that pops up to me when I think of Teddy right now and the style of play he's in or the people he's close to is Jacoby Brissett. And we saw that, Jacoby Brissett had that many starts last season. I believe he had an $8 million cap figure last year. He has a $21 million cap
last
figure
year of his contract
in 2020, and it was a short extension that he signed. But again, I love Teddy. It's tough for me to separate. He's one of those players for me. How much I would love to see him as a quality starter for an NFL team, and I think he was kind of on that path before that horrific knee injury. But right now, just as we've seen him of late, there's nothing that to me stands out and says, hey, we need to sign this guy for $25+ million and give him the keys to our franchise, someone we can build around. He's more of that bridge player.
He's someone I definitely believe needs the right play caller helping him out. But either way, what this ensures, Drew Brees coming back, is that Bridgewater is, as we speculated all along, definitely hitting the open market.
I have this fear.
He's gone.
I have this fear that, none of these quarterbacks are really going to change places other than Phillip Rivers and like Andy Dalton. And that's no fun. We want chaos. We want things to talk about on the show.
Well, because when's the last time we saw this many notable names come out and like be available? That's the thing.
I mean, is it as far back as your Dante Culpepper and Drew Brees discussion of, two franchise quarterbacks changing teams? Is it that far back? Possibly.
And that was only two. This is literally 8 to 10 that matter.
I just hope that
even going like to the depths of Marcus Mariota, like that's a name that could matter next year.
Moving on, The Athletic's Jordan Rodriguez reports that the Panthers believe Cam Newton is likely to pass a physical and be cleared for football activities in March. It's only, what day is it? February 18th. And I'm not saying I'm cammed out right now. There's been a lot of Cam Newton speculation over the last couple weeks. And a lot of it is from Cam, and he certainly is not shy on social media. But then there's a lot of it from Panthers owner David Tepper as well. Here's a recent quote from Tepper. Listen, I'm not a doctor. I've said 1,000,000 times, is he healthy? Cam is not a doctor. There's a lot of things that can happen. But first is he healthy? Tell me that, and then we can talk. That's the biggest thing, right? It is notable to me, Daigle, that this report of Cam being healthy almost lines up with free agency opening in mid-March as well.
I'm of the belief that this physical doesn't matter whatsoever for the Panthers directly, only for Newton's value in the trade market. I don't think, and you're the Panthers insider, so you can tell me what you know. You can tell us what you know. I don't think it matters, even if he's 100% healthy. He would not be back on this team next year.
I might not know exactly.
A little bit with that smile on your face, though.
But here's my translation to that quote that David Tepper said. I truly think David Tepper's fear is that in a rebuilding year, which 2020 is absolutely going to be for this team, that giving Cam Newton a 1 or 2 or 3 year extension only to see him get hurt immediately at the start of the 2020 season is his biggest nightmare. I mean, in Tepper's eyes, that would set the quarterback position, which is the most important position in this game that we watch a lot. That would set it back multiple years.
Yes.
And in a rebuilding year, you don't want that to happen for the 2021 season or 2022 season. A lot of people out there might ask, well, Cam is under contract, right? He has a $19 million contract in 2020, so why not just play under that? Once again, I will sit here and say that Cam Newton, I would be stunned, shocked, if he plays on that contract in 2020 because it's non-guaranteed. A former MVP quarterback, even coming off 2 hurt seasons and 2 shoulder operations and now a foot operation, is not going to play a year with no guaranteed money attached to his name for the future. That does not line up to me, and it doesn't line up for Cam Newton's team either.
And with Carolina being able to save $19 million just by outright releasing him if they get no value, do you think that's the case here if they don't find a suitor? Or just part ways directly?
No, I would be, okay, let's rank things of surprising moments, okay?
Okay.
The most surprising to me would be that Cam plays on that non-guaranteed contract.
Okay.
The second most surprising is that the Panthers just release him outright because there's no compensatory pick involved there if they just release him outright. And 2, someone will give the Panthers something if they want to move on. If they are so fearful of him not being healthy for the 2020 season. Look, in a perfect world, Cam Newton is the quarterback, not just for 2020, but in 21, 22, 23, so on and so forth, because finding a talent like healthy Cam, which you saw at the top of the 2018 season for those first 6 to 8 weeks, That's fantastic. I mean, I think people forget that he was hurt to enter the 2019 season. I mean, he suffered this Liz Frank injury, I believe against the New England Patriots in the preseason, sat out 1 or 2 weeks of the preseason, and then came back and shouldn't have been playing on this injury. He was playing on this injury, and that's why he was so poor to start the year. I mean, there was those against the Tampa Bay Bucks, Thursday Night Football. There was that 4th and 1 or 3rd and 1 with no time left on the clock to try to win the game, and they did a jet sweep action with Christian McCaffrey rather than allowing Cam Newton to run in the end zone. I mean, he was playing hurt in those moments. I would love to see a healthy Cam Newton play no matter where it is.
And if he's healthy, you just imagine like Drew Brees coming back at 41 years of age. Cam Newton only turns 31 in May. Like he's
our age.
He could have 8 to 10 years left. Yeah.
He's our age. I'm trying to think of other, like the most surprising moments after that. I think next is Cam returning to the Panthers, and then I think least surprising is him playing somewhere else. I truly believe the Panthers have future seasons in mind rather than the 2020 season at the forefront. This is not a win now. This is not a Band-Aid scenario. It's a process scenario. And you clean house in the coaching.
Of course.
And the roster is going to be turned over this year quite a bit too. They're really changing their process of how they're probably evaluating players with Matt Rule coming in as well. It's going to be a fascinating case study to watch. I'm excited.
So, let's put a stamp on it.
Yep.
Your percentage of seeing Cam Newton play for the Panthers next year. Not on the roster, but play for the Panthers.
49%.
Oh, okay.
51% that he's gone.
I was leaning like
That's really
90%
close.
He's gone.
Wow.
It's just a new regime. Like nowadays, you can't. They are not wanting to rebuild with that. Unfortunately, I understand he could still be a great player, but the situation is so volatile. It's just one that reeks just to move on and go separate ways.
We've talked a lot about the Panthers. Let me spin one more, though, your way. So few times are teams picking in the top 10, and when they are in the top 10, they never want to pick in the top 10 ever again. This spot where the Panthers are in at number 7 overall, to me, it's eerily similar to where the Eagles were when they traded up for Carson Wentz at number 2. They, at that time, had Sam Bradford on the roster. Remember that? Trade him away prior to the season after trading up for Carson Wentz. But they had these deals of trading away Kiko Alonso and trading away DeMarco Murray, and they were able to slowly move up, and then they trade future picks to get up to number 2 overall. If the Panthers are in love with, say, Tua, and those medicals check out as well,
right?
They should not hesitate in making a extremely bold move to get up to whatever spot is necessary to get the franchise quarterback. The Eagles took that risk. I think it has paid off, despite what people think of Carson Wentz. To me, he's year after year a potential MVP candidate because of the talent he has in the field and if he can stay healthy, which is a bad situation this year, in my mind.
And this opinion includes Herbert as well, not just.
Sure. Yeah.
Even though
it does.
I know we have deciphering, but yeah.
Whoever they believe is a franchise quarterback other than Joe Burrow, who's most likely going number 1,
right?
If they feel he is worthy of the number 1 overall selection, the Panthers should try to move up and obtain whatever quarterback it is. Because again, you don't want to be picking in the top 10. I mean, next year they could be picking at 12, and then they're still out of luck at the quarterback position. Who knows? Again, it's just eerily similar to me of where the Eagles were when they traded up for Carson
Wentz. And it's a fascinating situation to watch.
Cardinals have re-signed their quote-unquote franchise left tackle in DJ Humphries to a 3-year, $45 million contract. Humphries gets $29 million guaranteed. This is a player who was once viewed as a bust as the 24th overall selection in the 2015 draft. He's 26 years old right now, and just for the first time started all 16 games in his career. And prior to that, he had missed 37 games across his first 4 seasons in the NFL due to injuries. Left tackles and tackles in general get paid a lot of money, John Daigle. This seems to be a situation where the Cardinals look at the free agent market and be like, we probably should just keep the guy on our roster right now, even if some people might consider it an overpay.
And he'll get to test the market again at 29. This is a great deal overall for him. At the very least, he did battle, as you said, the injury concerns, but he started all 43 games he's played with the Cardinals, a cornerstone despite poor play and injuries so far in his career. So yeah, we talked about Kingsbury masking the offensive line as he did with Texas Tech, despite their talent level. And Humphries was, at the very least, a catalyst. And And Kyler Murray's rushing prowess helped a lot as well. But it at least made their offensive line serviceable, and he was one of the important pieces.
That offensive line certainly needs to be elevated this offseason. I always throw out the name Steve Keim and wonder if he's the right person to, have talent that is equal to the level of Kyler Murray, because there are so many plays that you watched Kyler last year and see immediate disruption, see the quarterback evade that disruption, keep his eyes on the field, and rifle a pass 26 yards downfield for a completion. That can't happen week to week. And we talked to Kenyon Drake on the show, and he was talking about blocking schemes and not knowing what to do. Sometimes I kind of felt like the offensive line was like that based on their missed blocks. But Cliff did such a good job of designing that run game where, the individual pieces, and Humphreys probably was the most talented. Individual pieces weren't there, but as a collective group, he was able to create and manufacture space for your running backs. And that's really all you can ask for, and just hope that that talent improves as you move on.
And with the number 8 overall pick, they have a lot of positions to shore up. But it does bring into light, do they go playmaker like a wide receiver at that position, a Jerry Jeudy type, or do they also continue addressing their offensive line?
What does it say about the tackle market? $15 million-ish per year puts him at the number 5 overall tackle in pay per year, behind Lane Johnson, Trent Brown, Taylor Lewan, and Nate Solder. The total guarantees are much lower than all 4 or 5 of those names that I mentioned. It's interesting to me because when I look at those tackle contracts, one, it's super difficult to find one in free agency that another team lets go and you think can be a quality starter for you. But 2, we've kind of come to this point where, at least at the top, right tackles and left tackles are being paid the same. And I think that's perfect. I think that's how it should be. Because for so long, the right tackle position was considered lesser than the left side. It really should never have been, at least now, with quality rushers lining up on both sides. But also, you can give more help to the left tackle if your right tackle is better. You can give more help on the right side if your left tackle is better, whichever one is in isolation more often. And so I think it's just really cool that we've seen the last few years that those 2 positions, it's not the blind side anymore. They really are of equal value to teams.
But also why, as we harped on last week, it's so important for the Redskins to get it right with Trent Williams.
Yes.
Because it's still an important part of the offensive line. And looking at Nick Menzio's free agent tracker, just a few list of names at the top. Anthony Costanzo, Jack Conklin, Andrew Whitworth, Jason Peters, and Brian Bulaga. So it's top heavy, but it's still a thin.
Let's go to those Washington Redskins that you just mentioned. They have released cornerback Josh Norman. Norman had 4 years in Carolina, 4 years in Washington. It's funny, I looked at his contracts and how much he has accumulated over the years. Josh Norman made $3 million with the Carolina Panthers over those 4 seasons, just over $3 million. Made $61 million with the Washington Redskins. You remember that offseason story when he was franchise tag and the Panthers with Dave Gettleman were trying to work out a contract extension with Josh Norman? Then some random, almost training camp day, they release him out of nowhere. Not release him, just remove the tender because a long-term contract wasn't going to work out. And then I believe they got a compensatory pick this past draft because of it. Look, we know that Washington has changeover this year. We talked about Ron Rivera. It's very telling, though, that Ron Rivera, who has spent time with Josh Norman in his past, elects to not have Josh Norman on his team during his first year in Washington.
We played so poorly and unfortunately didn't live up to the hype of that 5-year, $75 million deal he did initially sign with Washington. And it ended rocky. 2 healthy scratches. Didn't even travel in week 17 to Dallas with the team, and which is when you knew he was going to get sent off into the open market. Fortunately, though, much like a Super Bowl, how you told Chris Long he does well on both sides of the spectrum, football player and on the mic.
Yeah.
Josh Norman is a really good TV analyst, really good. So no matter what he decides, I believe he'll be 33 in this new league year. He still has his options open if he decides to walk away immediately.
Yeah, it's a player who's drastically declined, as you mentioned. Low-key, he's 32/33 now. It just shows you that in his peak season, it was his final year in Carolina, he was 28 years old. That makes sense. We see it all the time with players peaking at 26, 27, 28.
Time flew by.
Yeah.
Because he was a shutdown corner.
Yeah.
At one point.
Yeah, but at the time, he still only lined up on one side of the field. That's an argument that those people can make. But everything aligned in that season. Obviously, the Panthers' defense disruption up front, Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis at the second level. Then you had someone like Josh Norman on one side of the football who was able to make big play after big play. it just shows you, though, and not to get too into this as we enter draft season, but, I mean, Josh Norman was old entering the NFL. He was 23 or 24 years old coming out of Coastal Carolina. That was one of my first Shrine games working with this company. It was interesting to watch. He was great down there. But, after that first contract, he was 28, 29 almost. And so it can be difficult to have those players and understand, are they going to continue this peak that we just saw them in their second contracts? And obviously with Norman, it didn't in his final couple of years in Washington, versus drafting someone when they are 21, 22 years old and having those extra years before they hit that peak decline in 30, 31, 32.
Did he stand out at the Shrine game?
Oh, he was awesome.
Awesome.
I mean, some might say that he was guessing on routes, but that's kind of Josh Norman's game. He was awesome at the Shrine game, and yeah, one of the more memorable performances I've seen. Let's keep it going. ESPN's Adam Schefter reports the Lions have spoken to multiple teams about a potential trade for cornerback Darius Slay. Jeremy Fowler, who we talked about as well, who was one of Adam Schefter's colleagues, added this on top of Schefter's tweet, if I can pull it up. Slay would definitely welcome a fresh start elsewhere. Lions and Slay have discussed a contract extension for the last 2 years. They haven't found a sweet spot, so that sets the stage for a trade.
If you recall, they attempted trading him mid-season, but the asking price was a quote-unquote Jalen Ramsey-like deal, which suggests they asked for multiple first-round picks and an extra to sweeten the pot, which they weren't going to get for a 29-year-old corner. Like, the difference between he and Jalen Ramsey, ages just in general, is what separated them. And so now he can probably be had for a second or third rounder this offseason, since ideally you're not only trading for him, but you pretty much have to agree to an extension beforehand, since he's looking to become one of the highest paid corners, if not the highest paid corner in the league, and make over $15 million annually. It's just a shaky situation that I understand the Lions don't get better in their secondary by trading him, but they're handcuffed from a business perspective, and they pretty much have to.
The Jalen Ramsey conversation doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, one, he was 25 years old, and you just mentioned it, Darius Slay is 29. I did reach out to cornerback expert Ian Hartitz, who tracks all these guys throughout the entire season for a column. He did mention that Darius Slay travels, which we all see when we watch, but not just travels, he also works in the slot. And that's something that a lot of cornerbacks don't do. There's a difference. Like, there's a reason why there are nickelbacks on teams, big nickels, whatever, who only play in the slot, because you don't have that sideline to help you in coverage. You have to work through so much more trash in the middle of the field. And so Darius Slay, while his play kind of did tank this year, if you look at grades from various sites.
He was still very good, but yes.
I think a lot of that, though, is just playing an awful defense. No pass rush up front. A team with zero depth. That certainly hurts the top playmaker they have in the secondary. Do you know what actually brings up to me is that Marcus Peters was just like an amazing deal for the Baltimore Ravens this year. Like, remember when the Jalen Ramsey trade happened? That was facilitated because they got rid of Marcus Peters, that they basically traded an undisclosed draft pick and Kenny Young for. The Ravens did. Then Marcus Peters was like a monumental piece in that secondary, whereas we mentioned multiple first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey and most likely a day 2 pick for Darius Slay coming up.
And it's an odd situation for Detroit just because they do hold the number 3 overall pick, and they've been linked to Ohio State's Jeffrey Okudah because they could just shore up the cornerback if they allow Slay to walk or trade him. But it's just, I don't know how you rebuild. You can't rebuild that defense in one season. As you said, top heavy, but just needs so many pieces of pass rush in particular.
But the Lions are in a different spot, I think, than like the Panthers team that we mentioned, where the Panthers have like this future that they can declare process to. The Lions don't. I mean, Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, like, this is an organization that might be on their last leg with these decision makers in place.
Totally.
They could have done that last offseason. But this is one where it's a big year for everyone in Detroit. Not too dissimilar to maybe the big year that it was for San Francisco heading into this season. A lot of things went against Detroit this year. So many injuries, a lack of roster talent. All the Patriots ties that they have, you think that at the very least they could have a good defense, but that certainly wasn't the case this year. We need to add that Darius Slay also wants to be paid as the highest corner in the league. We mentioned this last episode, but here are the top 5 contracts right now without anything changing across the league. Xavier Howard is at $15 million as number 1. Then you have Tremaine Johnson, Xavier Rhodes, Patrick Peterson, and Kyle Fuller. Yeah, I mean,
That's going to change this offseason.
It will. Jalen Ramsey will probably get a deal.
Yeah.
Look, I could see Darius Slay up there. He had 4 great seasons before this down year. So it's easy to pitch from both sides. But it almost certainly, wherever he does get dealt to, and it certainly sounds like he's going to get dealt to someone, a new contract has to be in the works because of that.
And despite the outlandish request at the deadline, the Broncos and Eagles were still confirmed as interested in calling about him. So it would make sense to see him land with either one of those organizations. Denver, especially since they're losing Chris Harrison free agency most likely.
Yeah. The Eagles just continue to throw picks at that position too, by the way.
They're trying.
They are trying.
Sidney Jones and a pick makes sense, to be honest.
They are trying everything. They're trying everything. Should we talk more trades? Trades are always fun,
Let's
Daigle.
open it up some more trades.
Let's take it around the trade machine. Put a little quarter in, pull the lever, boom, trade rolls around. That's my sound effect for everyone out there. Boom, trade
And
rolls
preface
around.
this with, we tried to make these as plausible as possible.
Yes.
We didn't just get wild.
No, we didn't cheat the system like you can in Madden, where you can always trade for the #1 overall pick in the future. And yeah. I mean, if only franchise building.
First round pick, because some of those Maddens had the actual measurables web on them.
Did they really?
And even though they hid the player stats, all you have to do is read a web and you can draft the best player.
More about these trades. We tried to keep them at best player for player picks. We did mention picks or include picks to sweeten the deal if we had to. Why don't you kick us off, Daigle? Give us the first one.
Yeah, we'll start with David Johnson. I don't have the run sheet in front of me. I'm assuming we're starting with David Johnson, though. As we mentioned, Cards GM Steve Keim's questionable decision-making, but he did, surprisingly, confirm, surprisingly only because GMs usually don't come out and are this honest, but they said cutting him is not an option, which makes sense given his money. It would be $16 million in dead cap space.
Yeah, that's why it's not an option.
Because of that ludicrous 3-year deal, possibly the worst contract in the past decade. So I'm trying to make this reasonable because people smarter than me have already ruled out that because of the money, the Cardinals just can't get away from this contract. However, I think they really can and will be more than willing to take on $6 to $8 million of the cap hit and then send him somewhere, which for me would be the Bucs. And the Bucs would only have to pay $4 to $6 more million and then rework his deal because David Johnson doesn't have any more guaranteed cash after 2020. And it only makes sense, right? Not only does the fantasy community continue trying to piece a running back into the Bucs offense, especially with Peyton Barber now out the door in free agency, but the whole reason David Johnson got that ludicrous contract was because of his 2,000 all-purpose yards with Bruce Arians in 2016. Injured the following year, but then got the lucrative extension in 2018.
Look, I'm not smart enough to know the cap situation for every player and every team, so I constantly go to over the cap. If you have a little pull down, you can click on trade for them in pre-June, and the cap savings for a trade for David Johnson would actually be $8 million. Now, if they cut him, that's impossible because then they have to give up an extra $2 million on top of that $14 million cap hit. So that's a lot. And like you said, it's impossible. The trade is much more feasible. So what are the parameters of the trade that you are offering?
It's not sexy, but I think it's pretty easy that the Bucs have lined up their 2018 6th-round pick, Jack Sitchie, a linebacker in the middle of the field.
Yeah, tell me everything you know about Jack Sitchie.
I know that the Cardinals need him in this hypothetical scenario because it only makes sense.
From Wisconsin.
But ideally, he was supposed to be behind Levante David and Devin White as the third middle linebacker, right? But he's been injured the past 2 seasons. So the Cardinals allow the second most passing yards. We're just going to give him Sitchie because we know very little about him. And then we're also going to throw in a 7th-round pick. And by the way, the 7th-round pick I think actually can and does happen.
Well, basically what you're doing is a salary dump here.
Yeah.
From Arizona's perspective.
Sitchie's only due like $3 million, so it's not even a salary dump.
It's a salary dump, and from the Cardinals' perspective, that would allow them to franchise tag, if they have to, Kenyon Drake to bring him back as well.
And remember, in all of these workings, the Bucs would likely rework David Johnson's deal because they have to either extend and or franchise tag Shaq Barrett all in one offseason, which they're going to do. They're bringing both back. It's somehow, some way.
I don't know if this is the best one to start off with.
It's a complicated one. Listen, you wanted to spin the wheels.
I mean, look, whenever we talk podcasting, we always say every single episode we have to bring up Jack Sitchie. So I'm glad we hit our quota for this one. I'll go next. A big name, Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is an interesting part here in mid-February. Can I read some of Stefon Diggs' cryptic tweets
Oh my God,
lately?
please do.
They're wonderful.
I love them.
Always got an ace up my sleeve for whatever was dealt. That was 18 hours ago. Just right before then, I fell back 100 times when I don't get the credit. Seen this movie 100 times. I know where it's headed. Things getting interesting, ellipses. A wise man told me don't argue with fools because people from a distance can't tell you who is who. I think you could make a pretty easy path and compelling case that all these tweets are just directed at Kirk Cousins. Look, their relationship is rocky. It's not settled. It's certainly not as clean and clear as a quarterback one and wide receiver one should be. Right now, I think there's an easy argument to make that Stefon Diggs is a top 10 wide receiver in this league, a top 12 wide receiver in this league. But right now, he's still under contract for the next 4 seasons. The wide receiver 13 in salary this season, and that's ahead of people like Michael Thomas probably getting paid. But you know what home makes sense to me? The New England Patriots.
Sure.
With Tom Brady returning, this is a team that if they want to bring the band back together, they must improve the pieces around Tom. Because Tom is not in a position, while we all think he played a little bit better than he's given credit for, he's not in a position right now to elevate all the talent around him. And that was the case last year in midseason. This Patriots team was like, okay, we have to improve. We can't just rely on Julian Edelman and Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry. That's not enough because our offensive line sucks right now.
Right.
So they go and spend a second-round pick of Mohamed Sanu. Thinking back, not the wisest move, but it kind of puts you in the frame of mind that this team understands.
They need playmakers.
What
they
they
need
need.
somebody.
And Stefon Diggs is someone that can line up on the right, line up on the left, put him in the slot if you have to, and he can create separation and win. And he's still, I believe, just 25 or 26 years old.
He's still so young.
I mean, he's still so good. So this is what I propose. You ready for this? Stefon Diggs to the New England Patriots because what do the Vikings need? Cornerbacks. Their cornerbacks were some of the worst.
Offensive line too, but yes, cornerbacks.
Worst in the NFL last year. I mean, Xavier Rhodes, who we mentioned is a top 5 paid corner in the league, was one of the worst corners in the league.
And could be on the outs how badly he played.
Trey Waynes is a free agent. So I nominate J.C. Jackson, who's another UDFA fine by this Patriots organization.
Only 22?
Who has played extremely well, is an outside corner with length and can go and get it and win in contested situations. Pair him with Mike Zimmer on the outside, and then because this team doesn't have a second-round pick, throw in pick 85, which is in the 3rd round as well, and boom, Stefon Diggs is a New England Patriot. What say you, John Daigle?
And Kirk Cousins, by the way, only has 2 more years left on his deal. So if you are getting rid of Diggs, most likely that money is also going to re-sign Kirk Cousins, which is a path that's coming in the next year.
I mean, if I were running a team, and I'm certainly not, I'm sitting here with you instead, I would not hesitate to spend a second-round pick on Stefon Diggs if I were running an NFL organization. I know a lot of people think like, well, just draft one of these wide receivers in the second round. It's supposed to be a great receiver class, yada, yada, yada. I want a proven commodity. I want a proven player on a very valuable contract. This is one that, isn't stretching these teams very much in terms of the salary cap. Stefon Diggs is an affordable player right now, and too often we value draft picks far too much, I think, because of the potential of what they could be. Just give me Stefon Diggs, and I have my wide receiver 1 for my team.
It's a much easier trade to navigate than any Jack Sitchy situation because this is 2 years in a row now that Diggs has been, at the very least, rumored at the trade deadline. And remember, there was that weird situation where he walked out and threatened to not come back and then suddenly showed up again, and the team tried to bury it as much as possible. It is an unhealthy situation for both the receiver and the organization, which is why all signs do plausibly point to him going elsewhere.
Should we go for another round?
Let's go through another round. Do you want me? All right. Let's do, where's my notes here? Here we go. We're going to move Jamal Adams because Jamal Adams was frustrated on the Jets last year that behind his back was dangled by Joe Douglas at the trade deadline, despite being arguably the best safety in the entire league. And there's one team who did call about him, and that was the Baltimore Ravens.
Well, and the Dallas Cowboys.
And the Dallas Cowboys. 2 teams that called about him. But in this scenario, we're putting him on the Ravens, not only because they lost Tony Jefferson recently, their safety, who failed his physical and then got cut afterwards, but given their contracts and the terrific job they've done in structuring their offense, all starters being brought back, I believe it was 21 of starting 22 back under a deal now, we can squeeze Jamal Adams. And This is probably going to make a few Ravens fans unhappy. It's a tough one because we got to make some sacrifices here to get Jamal Adams in next to Earl Thomas. But I'm swapping Marlon Humphrey
Daigle.
for Jamal Adams because both of their deals are coming up. 1 year's left on their deals for both players.
Wow.
And in this situation, you likely probably have to re-sign Jimmy Smith this offseason, who is an unrestricted free agent now. But I think it's worth it bringing in Jamal Adams.
Keep the keys away from Daigle. I think this is ludicrous. I don't like this one at all.
Really?
Yeah. One, Jamal Adams is an uncommon type of player.
Yeah.
In that he's not exactly like a safety, okay? He's not an Earl Thomas-like safety at all. He's not a split safety at all in the back half. He's not a coverage safety really either. Where he does, I'm not saying he's bad in those areas, where he does his best work is near the line of scrimmage, coming up and approaching it like an extra defender in the box or even lining up as an edge rusher or as a linebacker. He's more of like a linebacker to me than anything else because he causes havoc in the backfield. He creates tackles for loss. He forces the direction of the play to go in the opposite directions. He's a playmaker in that area of the field.
Absolutely.
I just don't know what the value, I mean, obviously the Cowboys were involved. Other teams were involved. I don't know how I would value a player like that. Not saying Jamal Adams is not good. He's very good. Widely respected in football media and the football universe. That's just a difficult player to peg because he doesn't necessarily do like safety-like things that we think of when the best one's at the position. And instead he's closer to like a linebacker who's making plays in front of him. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I struggled with this one. Like, I think it does make sense, the team absolutely. And I knew Marlon Humphrey would be controversial. However, the goal for the Ravens in my mind is to beat Patrick Mahomes every year. And I think Jamal Adams is a better piece for that than Marlon Humphrey. And I could very well be wrong. I just think that scheme is better for him, especially when you put him next to, you still have Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, and Earl Thomas.
Interesting. That's a difficult one for me.
It's tough. I understand.
Because Marlon Humphrey, at times, even switching to the numbers in the 40s, which I would never advocate for any cornerback or safety to do, because it's 44. Is that what he's wearing now?
Yeah.
I believe so.
That's also an Ian thing.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not say that jersey numbers reflect on a player's play?
Jersey numbers matter.
They do matter. I was trying to look up where Marlon Humphrey ranked on PFF's list. Here it is.
Marlon Humphrey was also a Swiss Army knife. He can play both in the slot and on perimeter, which makes him strong. But Jamal Adams can do so much as well.
Yeah, just for me, Jamal Adams just wins in the box. I shouldn't say just. I think that's his best area. And again, he causes havoc. He destroys whatever the plan is. But it's tough to put a value on that type of player.
Well, I called my sources, and the Jets aren't going to take Mark Ingram and Le'Veon Bell, so we got to make it Marlon Humphrey.
David Njoku's been in the news quite a bit lately, most likely out of the Cleveland Browns organization after they picked him in the first round just a couple years ago. This is a player we talked about last week with Greg Olsen, who is still yet to find a team despite the deadline that he gave us, that the tight end position takes a while to develop. You know, they might not work in their first contract or with their first team, and I can definitely see a player of David Njoku's style and profile to succeed better on the second team that he goes to. It just hasn't come together week in and week out with him and the Browns. Sometimes, bad hands. Sometimes not knowing exactly what to do. Sometimes it's the play around him and not being put in a position to succeed.
His blocking was extremely poor the first 2 years as well.
For sure. He was also super young entering the league, left Miami early. Again, this is a player to me that once he gets in his fourth, fifth, sixth year will be much improved than his first and second year. So then I look around the league and I say, what offensive coordinator likes to use tight ends and what team of those does not have a tight end basically on the roster right now? And I land on the Washington Redskins. Scott/Norv Turner. Now it's just Scott by himself, but we know his history with Norv, his papa. Frequently used the aforementioned Greg Olsen, and that tight end has been super important to this team. Well, in recent weeks, we've seen Vernon Davis retire. We've seen Jordan Reed possibly retire in the next coming weeks, who's still not been cleared from his concussion.
6 months.
So it makes a lot of sense to me to send David Njoku to the Washington Redskins. Do you like the move?
I do like the move. As I've told you on this podcast time and time again, I'm actually very excited to see what Scott Turner can do. Not only in year one, but in year two. I want to see him develop with the new regime. and have an offense all to himself following his departure from Carolina. And as you said, they need not only an offensive tight end, but someone really underneath Terry McLaurin, because sure, they have Cam Sims on a rookie contract from
Trey Quinn.
And they have people on rookie contracts in the slot, but they need a explosive playmaker. And for all of Njoku's flaws, at the very least, we know his athletic ability can't be matched, really.
This is a two-parter, though, because one, we need to ask what the Browns believe of David Njoku, because that's a new brain trust as well. Now, Andrew Berry, I believe, was part of the staff that drafted David Njoku, so maybe he thinks more highly of him than John Dorsey and Freddie Kitchens did. But we don't know what Kevin Stefanski thinks, so on and so forth. The other part of this is also that when you hear a name like David Njoku from the Browns end, their fan base says, oh, we spent a first-round pick for him. We want equal value of that in return. You're not going to get that. In fact, like there are rumblings that you might see a third-round selection or even a day 3 selection for someone like Njoku who just hasn't hit that point. So the Browns in this case will probably ask for Trent Williams. I don't think Trent Williams is going back in return of this.
That was my scenario, but then I played it out in my head, and Trent Williams is not going for David Njoku.
No. And I actually think, Ron is mending that bridge. Like that's one of the reasons why Ron Rivera was brought into this team, is to change the culture and identity, and he's doing that. And if that means that Trent Williams can come back as a left tackle, I think they're going to do their best to try and do that. So these are names that Browns fans are not going to love, but I'm going to mention them anyways.
Because I think Jack Sitchy, he's on the Bucs.
I think that they are much more realistic. I would throw out Matt Ioannidis. Matt Ioannidis is an interior defensive lineman who had the highest pass rush grade, well, higher, I should say, than any of the Browns' interior defensive linemen last year. That's one name. So if you want that one, you can take him.
I've heard of him.
This is another or. You can look at a Jimmy Moreland, because he's a cornerback who went in the 7th round who I actually loved coming out of school. But he's a slot corner. The Browns don't have a slot corner. They have Denzel Ward. They have Greedy Williams on the outside. Greedy had a very, very rough rookie year, but they need a slot corner.
Injuries, yep.
They need a slot corner, and Jimmy Moreland could play that as well. So those are just a couple names. Again, I could more likely see a pick than entering it, but we're trying to do player-for-player trades.
To be honest, I don't even know if I'd give up Moreland for Njoku.
Wow.
But I like where your head's at, yes.
There's also been mentions of Quentin Dunbar requesting a trade. He then denied that after that report came out, yada, yada.
He's too good to let. I mean, I understand there's been crazier situations with players on their last year of their deal, and you just need to get some compensation in return. But Dunbar is too good for a new regime to let go.
Do you have any more?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay.
Let's get, in that same note, let's get a tight end to a team that needs offensive playmakers. And if we're giving the Patriots Stefon Diggs, we might as well also give them O.J. Howard.
Oh my God. I mean, I love it.
Since they called on O.J. Howard on the trade deadline and were told that he's just outright not available.
Okay.
The Bucs were looking for multiple first, I believe, as well, was the report. So we're going to do a little shakeup here, because if the time was ever to pounce to take on a contract from the Patriots, and I understand this position performed poorly as
I have no idea where you're going
whole
with this.
unit last year, I'm sending back Marcus Cannon for O.J. Howard.
Interesting.
2 years left on his deal, just over $16 million remaining. And the Patriots, I believe, have the pieces in place that they can still, at the very least, fill out the same performance on offensive line. It may not improve, but their contracts right now, albeit all question marks. Trading Cannon would allow them to bring back either Ted Karras or Joe Thuney, both who are free agents. So you've got to bring back one or the other. And then they still have Yilda Froholt and Yodny Kajust, who I wrote phonetically to get those right.
You did. Nice job.
On rookie deals, who are question marks, yes, but can play tackle. So at the very least, a healthy Isaiah Wynn mixed in with those, same offensive line. I think it's a good buy low deal since Cannon performed poorly given the shakeup and all the injuries that occurred last year.
Look, again, it's mid-February. We're trying to have fun. Giving the Patriots Stefon Diggs and O.J. Howard would be quite fun.
Oh my God, I would have fun with that.
That would be a lot of fun heading into the 2020 season. I'll close with one more. I mentioned this when we had our roundtables with Ian and Roto Pat. Let's give the Houston Texans Robert Foster. Robert Foster, this is cheating a little bit because Robert Foster right now is a restricted free agent after 2 years with the Buffalo Bills. But we know, in Alabama, he had 400 receiving yards, and that's about it. He destroyed that, annihilated that number in his first year with Buffalo, then was totally forgotten last year.
Just wasn't
with
used
the Bills.
at all.
No, you had John Brown, you had Cole Beasley, you had Dawson Knox. Those are the three pass catchers. And then Robert Foster, I think, only played on 20%.
And even when they traded Zay Jones midseason, they put in Duke Williams instead of Robert Foster.
So obviously he would have to be given some type of contract. But let's do a 1-for-1 here. Because to me, the Texans need backups just in case the Will Fuller experiment continues to miss because of injuries. Again, a healthy Will Fuller is perfect for this offense. But when that goes down, someone who wins vertically, a la Robert Foster, is very much needed. Meanwhile, we know Josh Allen struggles throwing down the field, throwing vertically. He much more needs someone that wins left to right, laterally.
Another Cole Beasley.
In the short to intermediate areas of the field. So why not just flip them? Let's give Robert Foster to the Texans and send Kiki Cutie to the Buffalo Bills. Cutie's also been injured quite a bit, but he can be a manufactured touch player. We've seen the Bills use someone like Isaiah McKenzie like that at times. So just sending a 1-for-1 here, I think might make sense for both because it fits the style of what they're looking for more.
And Cutie oddly ended up in the doghouse last year and then was replaced in the slot halfway through the season. So he's not even in favor of Bill O'Brien anymore. So you might as well put him on another team. Even coming out of the draft, QT, I remember Sigmund Bloom, Football Guys,
loved him.
Was so high on him. Just separation from the slot and the shallow. And he still does that well for my money. So yeah, I'm more than willing of just rolling out the least sexiest offense in the world and going Cole Beasley and QT on the opposite sides and just going with the Josh Allen.
That's going to do it for us. Again, no other podcast talks about Jack Sitchie other than this podcast.
And we didn't even mention A.J. Green I had to the Packers. I had Sammy Watkins to the Dolphins. Yeah, we had a few deals.
We've got a lot. We'll be back on Thursday. Just me and Daigle, plus Roto Pat for a segment as well. Next week's schedule gets a little more interesting. I'll be in
I don't even know it.
Indianapolis. Neither do I. At the NFL Combine, Hayden Winks will be joining me. We're going to do our best to have a number of interviews headed your way, either that be head coaches, GMs, possibly prospects. Worst case scenario, we have to talk to media people. You know, our friends in the media. We'll have a lot of those conversations as well. It'll be great. It'll be fun. It'll actually be my first time in Indianapolis.
I'm excited to listen.
It'll be good. So that's going to do it for us. Again, if you enjoy the show, consider rating and reviewing it, sharing it with one friend. Helps us out.
One friend.
Up the villa. We'll talk to you soon. Till Thursday. See ya.